This is a true story. For understandable reasons we will not use the real name and voice of the person telling the story. If you have a story to tell, a confession to make, if something is bothering you, if you are depressed and want to make your voice heard, send an email with your story, and we will make it known. You can find the email address in the video description.
My husband Harry and I have been together for 15 years and married for 13. We have 2 beautiful kids and are very happy. But there's one thing constantly hanging over my head and threatening to ruin our happiness. I once slept with his younger brother, James, and he knows nothing about it. I actually met James before I met Harry. We were in a nightclub and I was with a group of girlfriends. I was 23 and he was just 18. He had been giving me puppy dog eyes all night, and at the end of the evening he walked over and offered to buy me a drink. I'd initially dismissed him as being too young for me, but he was so sweet and kind. We kissed, one thing led to another, and he came home with me and stayed the night. We had a lovely time together, and in the morning he confessed that I was the first woman he'd slept with. It didn't put me off, but at the same time he was so young, and I wasn't interested in pursuing it further. I told him I'd had a great time, but didn't think it was a good idea to keep seeing each other. Fast forward a few months, and I met Harry through a friend. We live in a fairly small town, but at the time I didn't realize he and James were brothers. Harry was a few years older than me, had his own business, and was very self-assured. We started dating, and after a few months he brought me home to meet his family. When I walked in the door at his mother's house, only to lock eyes with James, my heart dropped to my stomach. Things were already quite serious with Harry and I didn't know how he'd take knowing that I had slept with his younger brother. I just pretended I'd never met James before, and smiled and said hello, although I was shaking inside. Thankfully James went along with it, and pretended it was the first time we'd met too. In retrospect it might have been better to at least acknowledge we'd met before, but I had been put on the spot, and was in total shock. As Harry and I continued to date, and things progressed, James and I continued to act as though nothing had ever happened between us, until one boozy Christmas Eve at their family home. Harry's parents always hosted an open house at their place on Christmas Eve, when they invited all their family, friends and neighbors over for drinks. At this point I'd been dating Harry for around 9 months, so it was my first time to attend, but the parties were pretty well known for being fun, and a little wild. All was going well, I had a few champagnes, and was enjoying the evening. I'd even managed to stop feeling stressed about the situation between James and me. At one point in the night I went into the kitchen to get a glass of water, when I heard someone behind me, and turned to find a slightly inebriated James standing there. Before I could react, he lunged for me and tried to kiss me. I dodged away from him, terrified someone was going to walk in. "I miss you, I haven't forgotten about our night together," he mumbled. "James, you need to keep that information to yourself," I hissed. "I love Harry, and if he knows about you and me it's going to ruin everything." He looked at me with such a hurt expression, that I immediately felt awful. "I'm sorry," I added quietly. "I had a great time with you, but it was one night, and it's in the past, and that's where it needs to stay." He just looked at me, then turned and walked out the front door. I didn't see him for the rest of the night. The following morning, on Christmas Day, Harry proposed to me and I accepted. But my joy was marred by the stress I felt over the secret I was keeping. We got married a year later, and have since had a son and daughter. James has never made a pass at me or spoken to me about our history together again. He has been dating a lovely girl for a few years, and I really hope they'll marry, and start a family too. There have been many times over the past 15 years that I have considered telling Harry the truth, but at what cost? It's always lingering there in the background, but the longer I leave it, the worse it becomes. I wish I had come clean right at the start, but then I may not have married him, and had our children, and that's a thought I cannot fathom either. My biggest fear is that it will all come out one day.